So just talk about JMU obviously joining the Sun Belt, finally FBS team as far as football goes. But, I kind of want to know a little bit about all the Sun Belt opponents, including App State, which you're well versed in. So I guess, it's right off the bat. This is kind of a renewal of a rivalry between JMU and App State. They've had multiple battles in the battle. Have you watched any of those games previously?
Yes, I was at the last game between JMU and App State in 2008, up your way. I was there. This was before the big stadium renovations, so it was kind of the older stadium. But that was a big game. That was one of the biggest games of the 2008 season for both teams, just because of the history and what had happened in the playoffs the year before, where App State beat JMU by 1 point after JMU fumbled at the 10-yard line with under 30 seconds left. And that was the first round of the FCS playoffs, and App State went on to win the national championship, completing a three-peat. So this 2008 game was previously scheduled. It was already on the books, so this was the natural revenge game for JMU. And I remember just how amped up and how crazy that whole day was. And I was there in the end zone. App State took a 21-0 lead at halftime, and then we violated one of the worst rules we ever could have. Older JMU fans will know what I'm saying, but we kicked it to Scotty. And then kind of the rest was history from there. JMU came back and I believe won 35-32, rushed the field. I imagine that was one of JMU's seminal victories of before the Virginia Tech game, obviously.
Yeah. And now here we are so many years later, and it's coming back finally, this rivalry. You guys obviously have a great football team, or one of those maybe non-Power 5 schools, but have been so dominant recently. Why is that?
Well, I could probably go on for hours about App State and what I think makes it great, or what other people make it great. But I think just overall is that kind of tradition set of going back to the 80s of continuously winning. I think App State has had 2 losing seasons since 1983. So that's a lot of winning, and that kind of breeds a culture of winning. Like the current head coach, Sean Clark, he played for App State in the 90s, and he won conference championships. And so he has that mindset. Former head coach Scott Satterfield also played in the 90s. He had that mindset of winning championships. And it brings back coaches who previously played at App State. A number of people who come up here and they want to come back one day, and they earned it, and that kind of breeds a fierce irritation to be great, as it was quoted one time. And I mean, I remember the quote last year: App State went 9-3 in 2020, and then before last season, Sean Clark says, "Yeah, that's not our standard. We expect better." So it's one of those things that you don't want to be the weak link in this decades-long chain of winning. So, yeah. And I think also from a facility standpoint, there's been heavy investment in stadium, and there's going to be future investment in indoor facilities, and just trying to bring the best players up to Boone and try to. And also there's the identity of App State typically historically been a run first team. Last season bucked that trend a little bit, but App State arguably has one of the most experienced backfields in all of FBS, not just the Sun Belt. So, and then you have a returning starter in Chase Bryce at quarterback, who is more of a passing quarterback. I mean, he does hand the ball off a lot, but he brought in a dimension that wasn't as prevalent before with the passing game. He's more of your typical pocket passer. If he needs to scramble, you pray he doesn't have to run too far. But he got better at running as the season went on. But it's just a combination of things. Just the fans demand it, the coaches demand it, the alumni demand it, and it's just kind of stayed that way. And it's amazing that has sustained itself go from FBS into FBS. And with one small hiccup year, it's just been these 9, 10, 11 win seasons ever since.
Yeah, and talking about that, you talked about 2 years ago the 9-3, and then last year 10-4. You guys made it to the Sun Belt Championship and then made a bowl game, and you're returning so many veterans. So, what is the expectation? Obviously, going into this season, we know it's a winning season, but is Sun Belt Championship the goal? Bowl games.
I think so. Yes, I think App State is obviously the coaches and the fans. I think are expecting to repeat again as East Division champions. I think we know the biggest right now. I think our biggest competition is definitely going to be Marshall and Georgia State. They're led by an App State grad. Sean Elliott is their head coach. He played with Scott Satterfield and Sean Clark in the 90s. So he has that kind of winning DNA mentality, and he's brought that to Georgia State. Who was the other team? I can't remember. Coastal. How can we forget Coastal?
Oh, yeah.
Grayson McCall, he's probably one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the Sun Belt. And so I think that group of four right there is kind of what App State fans are looking at as the chief competition in the East. I know that's kind of braggadocious to say to a JMU crowd, but that's kind of what App State fans are thinking of as who we got to compete with for the Sun Belt East Championship. And they're definitely expecting to win and also kind of get over the hurdle of last year, losing this championship game to Louisiana, to once again be Sun Belt champions for it would be the fifth time in eight seasons, fifth time in 7 or 8 seasons, because App State won 4 in a row, and then 2020 didn't make the championship game, which got canceled anyway due to COVID, and last year lost the championship game. So, yeah, championship or bust. I think Sean Clark has said many times, this program we play for rings.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of talked about the whole JMU thing. It doesn't seem like you guys are too worried about us yet. So I guess from a JMU perspective, like, what can we expect going into the Sun Belt?
Well, one thing about JMU's situation, moving up to FBS, it reminds me of when App State moved up to FBS going into the Sun Belt, what we were expecting and what we kind of were thinking of what we were going to get. And one thing that we definitely noticed, even against teams that were not good, teams that only won 1 or 2 games, is that everyone has talent in FBS. Everyone has a few players, skill players, or even maybe an offensive lineman or a tight end or a linebacker who's just really good. There's talent on every team, no matter how good or bad they are in FBS. And another thing is the depth. You get into that second string, that third string. You got some decent players as well. And App State and a few other programs have made it a habit of rotating those players in and out of games on a regular basis, so they get the snaps, they get the experience during the game while giving other players a rest here and there. So it's not like App State, if they lose a bunch of players, they have a whole bunch of players coming in that haven't played any snaps. So the depth, especially going in later in the games, you'll see players of oh, who's this guy? So I think a little bit of that, and also, especially in this East Division, you're going to see, rabid fan bases who really care about their football. I know, coming from the CAA, there's some fan bases that showed up, some that did not. Very similar to the old Southern Conference that App State was in. You had your mix of private schools and public schools. Some didn't show up for football. Some were more basketball schools. So Sun Belt is a football-first conference, and the fans want to win in football. Georgia Southern, who's probably going to be picked around last in the Sun Belt East, they feverishly care about football and have a fierce irritation to be great. Old Dominion, they're probably going to sell over 10,000 season tickets this year. They cared a lot about football since they started it just over a decade ago. And so everyone in the East Division, they care about their football. They will fill up their stadiums. They will make it a hostile atmosphere and, talk trash on message boards.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be an exciting season for sure. You mentioned Sunbelt football first, but what can we expect from other App State sports?
Well, App State sports, I'd say in the fall sports, you have some teams that are in transition. Both the volleyball program and the women's soccer team are both coming in with brand new head coaches for the first time in over a decade each. The programs had struggled for a few years. Volleyball actually had a couple of really good years a few years ago. They got to the Sun Belt Championship game twice, and that's no small feat, and especially with Texas State and Arkansas State and how dominant they can be in volleyball, especially Texas State. They're borderline top 25 in volleyball. But yeah, App State had kind of fallen off a little bit. So kind of a transition year for those two programs. So cross country is going to compete for conference championships. They typically do. They'll be in that top 3 in both men's and women's. Unless something's fallen off that I'm not aware of, but that's typically been the case. And then App State also in field has a field hockey team, which JMU also has a field hockey team, but it's not currently sponsored by the Sun Belt. App State field hockey is in the MAC, playing Central Michigan, Ohio, Bowling Green, and all them. So, and they've kind of been steady. They've been kind of around 500, which is better than they used to be. They used to be, scraping together 1, 2, 3 wins a season. So you're kind of hoping maybe they can break through this year, or because they're young and, they have but they also draw in some good competition because the ACC in field hockey is pretty dominant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know about that. And then your softball team. As a JMU fan, I love softball. Your softball team was above 500 last year. It's a good team.
Yes, it was Shelly Horner, who's a softball coach. She's really done a great job with that program. She took a program that the previous, I think, 3 or 4 years went a combined total of like 5-66 in the Sun Belt, and turned it into a winning program, which is no small feat because Sun Belt softball is like almost a power conference. Louisiana's great. Texas State's usually pretty great. South Alabama's great. Troy's pretty good. So, and obviously with JMU coming in, that's just going to raise the level of Sun Belt softball even more, where the league could possibly get multiple bids to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, for sure, man. It should be so exciting to finally see this rivalry renewed between JMU and App State. We have a lot of catching up to do, a lot of work to do. I'm excited about it as a JMU fan, and I'm excited to play such a great competition in App State for sure.
Yes, I think both universities are very similar in, being kind of a regional public university between more than 20,000 students. And it just makes perfect sense for us to play each other.
It does. It'll make for some exciting action, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate this.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too.